Doc was in charge, and he had this thing where, Mongols had a certain look and everyone had to be serious. And
Welcome to this episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Moot.
However, a lot of times, it's kind of a case by case. We've made exceptions, and I really advocated for this to be an exception because I already knew what was going to happen. I said, listen, if you put these guys out bad, it's going to change my status out bad because this is a small town. I work out with these guys. I do jiu-jitsu with these guys. Like, these are some of my best friends, so I'm not going to stop hanging out with them. So I really advocated for them to be out in good standings, and was told that that's what they were going to try and do. But then I got a call that they were going to be put out bad. They're just, they said, hey, we're going to follow the rules. They're out bad. They quit. They haven't been in the time. So they're out in bad standings. And they said, you're still good, but if you hang out with them, you're out bad too. So I was just up front and forward and told them right out the gate, because they kind of, they were trying to be cool about it. And they said, hey, if you post any pictures, then you get trouble. So essentially I took it as they were like telling me that it'll be fine, just lay low. And I'm not that guy. I'm not going to lie to anybody. So I just said, hey, these are some of my best friends. I'm going to keep hanging out with them. So they said, hey, we're sorry to hear that, but here's
I
your
think
status.
that causes a huge dilemma when you're friends with some people for so long and then say they leave the club or something happens and now you can't talk to them no more. Have you had people that left the club and then you can't talk to them and they're off doing whatever and you're like, damn, I can't even deal with them anymore because they're out bad?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I was a stickler for the rules. So the whole time I was in the club, if someone was put out bad, no matter how close I was to them, I didn't talk to them either. And now I'm on the other end of that sword, right? I see what it feels like. I get it. I completely understand. I'm not upset about it by any means. I knew, obviously I'm bummed about some relationships that I wish I could have kept, and some brothers I'd love to stay in touch with. But I knew the rules, and I knew, I knew what the consequences of my actions were when I said that that's the status I would take. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is, and I completely understand. And like I said, I was that guy too. Even when little Dave was initially out bad, I didn't talk to him at all until we figured out what was going on. And then once I was out of the club, I reached out to him and we kind of reconnected. But during then, I didn't talk to him either. So
Can you walk me through the day that you gave up your patch? The day you laid your patch down and walked away. Can you walk me through that?
man, it was kind of like days, so I was talking back and forth. I went out to Miami for this national run, and the politics of the new group was really starting to sink in, right? Dave was gone. People were kind of jockeying for position. um, it was just kind of all sinking into me that this was a new era, it was a new generation of guys. People wanted different things, and I was getting the impression that I might be getting pushed out due to politics and because of my relationship to Dave. And I really wanted to try and save my status. And so I thought the best move would be to retire, right? Leave in good standings, kind of be out of sight, out of mind for a while, let the dust settle, see what happens. And so that was my first play. And honestly, at first that wasn't bad, right? Because I still had my patch. I was still could still talk to everybody. But the problem with that is, as much as you want to walk away after doing something for almost 15 years, and then especially being in leadership so long, I still had one foot in and one foot out. So as much as I was like trying to walk away, I was still kind of hanging out there, right? And so the day that the call was made that those guys were out bad, and I made that decision, honestly, it wasn't a decision I really thought about. It just happened, right? It's like, hey, these are my guys. I'm loyal to my guys, and I'm not going to lie to the club about who I'm hanging out with. I don't think that'd be a good look to say, okay, cool, I won't kick it with them and then get caught hanging out with them or something. That's not the type of guy I am.
Yeah.
So it kind of took a while to sink in, and honestly, it didn't really sink in until I sent my patch back. So, I wanted to follow the rules, and there's always been those guys that are out bad and say, well, I'm already out bad, so what do I got to get my patch up for? Come get it type of thing. And these guys were my friends, man. I wasn't trying to burn bridges, even though my status was out bad. I had no animosity. There was no issues. So I was trying to keep it as cordial as possible. So I sent my patch back. At first, kind of fed up with politics anyway, so I was like, whatever. But the day after it was gone, yeah, that was pretty hard. That kind of, once it really sunk in that something I've had with me for so long that I put in so much work for was gone. That was pretty tough.
What was your brother's status at this time when all this is going on? Because that kind of affects you too, right?
Yeah, so my brother, so I'm in Illinois, my brother's in Oregon, so that helped him out quite a bit because we're pretty far apart now. He retired right before I did, just due to family stuff. He owns his own business. He's got kids. Like I said, we were in for 14 years. It was getting to be about that time. So he retired, and he's in good standings, and he's remained in good standings. He was smart enough to avoid some of the politics that I got roped into. I wouldn't say roped into. I chose to get involved in them, but still, he stayed away from a lot of that.
Yeah. So have you ever had any situations when you were out riding with these guys, any crazy situations that happened that you can explain to me?
I mean, stuff happened all the time, man.
Like crazy accidents?
Yeah, there was I was just telling someone this the other day. We were coming back in a big pack from Spokane, Washington, back to Salem, Oregon. And we were on the interstate doing about 80, and there's probably about 25 of us in this pack. So, we're running real tight. And we come up over the interstate, and there's a railroad tie in the fast pack in the fast lane. And so as we came up on it, my brother and I just barely went around it. And I looked in my mirror, and there was just smoke and parts and people flying everywhere. I mean, it shut down the whole interstate. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured. I don't know how. We were doing 90 miles an hour, and one bike landed on top of another bike. People were flying, parts were flying everywhere. We were about 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours from home still, so we had to wait quite a while for trucks and trailers, and yeah, it was a pretty big mess, man.
All the bikes are mangled all over the road.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, it was on Interstate 5, which is the main interstate on the West Coast. So the interstate was shut down, so there was traffic jams, and it was nuts.
I've heard crazy stories about when the bikers all ride in a pack. It's kind of like an accordion, like it's a like a living thing. Like,
it's crazy, especially when it gets big like that. We went to a bike event out here at Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri called Ozarks Bike Week, and we had about 190 motorcycles in the pack. Well, 190 Mongols, so probably over 200 motorcycles in the pack. And so long that I'm up front with my brother, and I'm looking in my mirror, and I can't see the back of it. And in fact, there's a lot of pressure with being the guy in the front. If you take the wrong turn or whatever, and we had cop helicopters are following us, and there's cops everywhere, and I took this exit, and I guess I was supposed to take an immediate right off the exit, and I missed it. And, with the pack that big, you can't slam on the brakes or like hard turn. So I had to go straight. And thankfully, it was the type of thing where I could go straight and loop up and kind of come back around to a big square. Yeah. And as we came back around, the other guys were still coming off the interstate. That's how big the pack was. It was like we came back to the tail of the snake. So, stuff like that, stuff I'll always remember. That was always awesome. And I always remember, being towards the front is, you don't notice much, and it stays really tight. But towards the back, man, by the time someone does a little throttle blip up front, the guys in the back are on full blown accordion mode, like you said, and they're either full bore to keep up, or they're slamming on their brakes because everyone's stopping. And I always hear a lot about the guys in the back or their first pack experience and how crazy it is, for sure.
Yeah. Do people fall? Do people fall out of the pack a lot?
Not often. Accidents? Normally, I mean, I not really in too many Mongol packs that I've seen has there been accidents within the pack. I would say the craziest would be our national run every year. We'd meet up in LA and ride to Palm Springs together. And a lot of the California brothers, there's a lot now that ride a ton, but in the era I joined, they didn't ride much outside of Southern California. So this was even though it was like a 3 or 4 hour ride, it was a long ride. And so there'd be brothers on old school bikes where their parts are falling off and dudes are passing each other, and some dudes rolling down this way and you're riding that way. I mean, it was madness, but that was usually the only crazy one. But normally things for the most part stayed, everyone normally by the time you join a 1% motorcycle club, you should know how to ride a motorcycle, and everyone's pretty proficient at riding. So, the guys that have a hard time are the hangarounds or the newer prospects, the guys that are in the back and trying to figure out if they've never done it before, how it works. But it's a pretty smooth system, honestly. And overall it runs pretty well.
Yeah, it's like tire to tire, right?
Pretty close, yeah.
So have you had any crazy funny situations? I'm sure you had, maybe during any of these club parties.
Yeah, I don't nothing's really jumping out at me, but or maybe nothing I could say on here. But yeah, we've had a lot of fun parties, man. And the one thing when I first joined the Mongols, like I said, Doc was in charge, and he had this thing where, Mongols had a certain look and everyone had to be serious. And he threw some great parties, don't get me wrong, but it was kind of like a evolving generation within the Mongols. And when little Dave took over, he was wanting parties to be not that old school, camping out in the field thing. He wanted to be a big shindig where everyone enjoyed it. And we started doing our national run at this Hilton Hotel in Palm Springs. And man, it was everything like MTV Spring Break. no one wore their patches really. We were just hanging out at the pool all weekend. It was a big pool party with DJs and strippers and all sorts of different games and contests. And I mean that was the business right there. That was one of those things that I think really separated us from a lot of other clubs at the time. It was just more of this like rock style style partying, where we would ride there, but we wouldn't even really touch your bike the whole time you were there because we just got after it and had this big pool party and partied really hard. And so when I was in charge of Oregon, it was always hard initially getting out of state brothers to come visit and stuff because there's so much other stuff going on. And so I really, really focused on having really fun and good parties, and the type of parties that when people got back to LA, they'd say, "Oh, did you hear they did this?" or "Did you hear they did that?" And so every year more and more would want to come. And one really cool thing about Oregon is Portland has more strip clubs per capita than any city in the US. So the strippers were abundant. So we had a lot of ladies at our parties and a lot of good times. So that was one thing that we became pretty well known for, was having some pretty badass parties in Oregon.
Did you feel ever like the older members of the Mongols and the younger members had like a disconnect from each other? Like you said, some of these members want to have these parties in the club and this and that, and these other members want to have like tents in a field. So
yeah, that was always kind of a funny statement. Is sometimes there would be some brothers come along and say, "Oh, we want to bring things back to the old ways," and that's what I would always think. What do you mean the old ways? Like being methed out in a field with no girls around, because so things had changed a lot, right? And like in the regions that I oversaw, no one was allowed to do meth. Little David made it that every Mongol had to have a full-time job. So things are a lot different than the quote unquote old days. And being in a big field partying with your brothers all weekend, I'm sure it would still be a good time, and we've done it. But it was a newer generation, and people wanted to, we want to go to a party that has girls at it and place where girls are comfortable coming, and kind of a different vibe. So yeah, there was definitely a difference there for sure.
do you feel like people treated you different once you had your patch?
Man, not really, to be honest. I feel like, I mean, I could see how it could happen for sure. But the way I grew up, and like I said, I grew up in that, kind of skinhead punk rock scene. I'd always made a reputation of my own, and always carried myself the same, whether I wore a patch or no patch. So not really, I don't think so. I would say that it actually, for me anyways, it forced me to kind of clean up my actions because, the skinhead scene, I go out and get in bar fights and do dumb stuff. But if you do that with the patch on, you're putting all your brothers at risk. The cops are going crazy, and a regular misdemeanor is a felony. So it really forced me to kind of clean up. And then on top of that, I kind of always had this image or this idea that everyone in my town or my area, I wanted to be welcome back everywhere. These are potential guys that are on my jury, for one, but for two, a lot of the times these clubs or these bars are doing like no patches allowed, no colors allowed. And I never liked to be that guy that pulled up and people like, shit, they're here, right? I always wanted to have that image that when we left, people were like, "Oh, I wouldn't fuck with them, but they were awesome. They were great. Come in with a smile, hold the door open for people, be polite, be respectful." And that way we were always welcome back. So as far as like being judged for your patch or not, I always just try to kind of challenge that stereotype. So I saw it more as a challenge versus like a walk in there puffy chested, you know who I am type of thing. So that was never really my get down. And I tried to make that so that our region was never like that either.
Have you ever seen anybody else that was out of the, where they told them you're out of the club? And because I know you had tattoos, they make you cover up the tattoos. What's the deal with that?
It's kind of case by case. I mean, so when I retired, I was allowed to keep my tattoos, but I actually started covering them up early, which actually upset some people, and I get it. But my idea behind it was, I didn't want to be fronting something I'm no longer representing, and it wasn't in a disrespectful way. I still had some club tattoos that weren't visible, but when it came to visible tattoos, I was no longer a Mongol, so I didn't want people to say, "Hey, look, he's a Mongol," and I didn't want to get treated as if I was, positive or negative. And so it wasn't. For me, it was out of respect for the club. I didn't want to be claiming something that I no longer was. But yeah, when you're out bad, in theory, you're supposed to cover up your tattoos. But in this new generation of hyper policing and everything else, you hear those old school, all those old school stories of what they did to get rid of people's tattoos and stuff, and that's not really a thing anymore. I mean, you do that, you're going to prison. So it's kind of a it's always recommended to all the guys that are out bad, covered up. And honestly, most people do, because once you're out, and especially if you're out bad, and especially if you're out bad and enough where people want your tattoos removed, you probably don't like the guys. They don't like you. There's no reason to have them anyways.
Yeah, right. there's probably some members out there that are like, oh, this dude came from another club. What are your words for the people who say that? Like, because some people will call him a club hopper, right?
Yeah, I get it a lot. And I get it to an extent. I will say that if you know anything about motorcycle club history, especially like in the early years, 60s and 70s, um, guys went from club to club until they found the right home pretty often. Um, and then, then it got to where certain clubs are in certain areas. So you only joined a specific club. I get it. I completely understand the hate to it to an extent. But the way I look at it is this: I first started coming around a small local club and learned history and what that world's all about. And I stepped up to a bigger club, so kind of outgrew it, went to a bigger club. And I was a kid. I was naive. I jumped into that scene, not to make excuses, but I jumped into it not knowing the politics of motorcycle club life. And I decided that club wasn't for me. I learned a lot, but I moved on to at the time was a bigger club. And then I stayed in for 15 almost 15 years, so yeah, I'd been in a couple of clubs, but I found the right family. And once I found that family, I was loyal and stayed with them forever, for a real long time. So, I mean, it's hard to argue because it's true. I've been in more than one club. As part of people saying club hopper or whatever, usually that's these guys that are in like a new club every 1 or 2 years and they can't really find a home anywhere and they don't really fit in. And that was never really my case. Like I said, I joined a club and then didn't really like it or it wasn't for me. And then I found the right club for me and I stayed. So.
Have you ever seen anybody that was in a rival club join you guys' club? Like somebody from the Hells Angels or anywhere else? Because I know that's happened, right?
I've heard of it happen like way back in the day, but I don't see how it could ever happen nowadays.
Because how can they trust this person,
Yeah.
right?
Now, what are you going to get a phone call and say our national runs out here in the desert and you're going to show up? I don't think so.
But there was Michael McCullum was a full patch Hells Angels, and then he went over to the Outlaws.
Yeah, and there's some guys have gone from Angel to Vagos or Vagos to Angels, and I mean there's a lot of guys that have gone from club to club, but as far as like clubs that have a history of issues, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, very, very. So do you feel like when you went to jail, they treated you different because you were in a club, or no?
Probably not, but honestly, because I was there, my crimes were against cops. I was locked up like 23 and a half hours a day most of the time. So, but no, I mean, even when I wasn't locked up, all, away from other people, just the way I carry myself and represent myself, I don't see it being any different.
Yeah, you seem like a pretty chill guy, man.
Yeah, thank you.
And you got a book. You want to tell people about your book, where they can get your book, and what's your book about?
Yeah, so I got this book called The Ride of My Life. It came out on the 7th, so just a few days ago. Yesterday, I guess.
How's
just
it
came
doing?
out yesterday.
Is it pumping out there?
Yeah, it's been the #1 bestseller in the motorcycles category and social work category, so it's already doing really well on Amazon. But it's just a story of my life, man. It talks about how I grew up, how I went from the skinhead scene to the motorcycle club scene, my life in the motorcycle club and the politics that came with it, and how I decided to leave and why I left. And now, now I'm a social worker. I work with at-risk teens. And so just kind of that whole full circle, how I grew up that way. And now I'm trying to give back and help, at-risk youth make good decisions.
Hey man, somebody's got to do it. If you don't do it, it's you can't just let your neighborhood and your community go to shit, I try
Absolutely.
to help my community as much as I can, man. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time coming on the show. You're welcome back here anytime, man. Maybe we could get together again and get more intricate into these stories.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a good time.
Definitely, man. And they could buy your book on Amazon, right?
Yeah, check out The Ride of My Life on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And yeah, that's right now. Those are the two best places to get it. You can't get them from me directly, so they just get them straight from the publisher on Amazon. And then if I see you out and about, or you want to hit me up or look at an event I'm at, I'm happy to sign it or shoot the breeze with anybody. So look me up on social media. It's OG__Mooch. Or like I said, see me out and about. Say what's up.
Definitely. And I'll put a link for his book in the description of this video, and you guys can check it out for yourself. Make sure you buy a copy because I get 20%. But if you guys like this type of content, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you can get my videos every time they drop. And if you don't like it too fucking bad, start your own podcast. Peace. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. See you.